Welcome everyone to this session, which is about custom consent management. And we're pleased to have Alessia, who's going to be talking us through that in a little bit. So that should be really quite exciting. So my name's Kerry Townsend. You can find me on Twitter if you ever want to talk to me about this, or there is an email for the group. So if you have any questions about the group, I think you can find that on the event page. So again, if anybody here wants to give a talk at any point, you just let us know on any channel, any way, anytime. Really, we would love to hear from you. And then Jimson.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jimson Lee. I'm from Cloud Analyst. I'm a Salesforce Marketing Cloud SME. I have taken the liberty to update my profile picture with my post-pandemic look. I think I don't look like short-haired Army crew cut anymore. And this is me. And yeah, at Cloud Analyst, we are a boutique Salesforce partner in Brighton and London, and we do a variety of projects with Salesforce Marketing Cloud and all the Marketing Cloud suites, including Customer 360. So I'll save that talk for a future talk.
Cool. So today we're going to go through a couple of things before we get on to our main talk. So just some announcements of things that's going on in the community. I'm also going to signpost some of the resources for the latest release, which is the January release, which I'm sure you've already started hearing things about, and we're actually going to focus our next meeting on that. Then on to the main show, which is about consent management. We'll have some questions and discussion if we have time at the end, and then we'll wrap up. So actually, Jimson, shall I hand over to you?
Yeah, right, thanks. So it's already February, and hang on, someone's coming in. It's February, and in the USA and Canada, it's Black History Month. In England, it's in October. And I want to focus on this for a second because the Salesforce Accelerate program, it's a program for startups led by Mike Creedon out in San Francisco. And it's a program for SIs and ISVs, primarily for those who want to build an AppExchange product. And it's special this time on cohort number 8 because they decided to focus on all Black founders, all African-American founders for this cohort. And it's quite special. They actually got a full class. And I'm really proud that Cloud Analysts has sponsored to offer pro bono consulting services for a Black-owned company. And the company is called Open Sponsorship. If you get a chance, you should check them out because with Cloud Analysts, we all do the 1% pledge. And I think those who know me outside of here know I do a lot of time in athletics and track and field. So I give my time, like 1% or 10% of my time to track and field and athletics. So the reason why I like open sponsorship, because a lot of my friends are coaches and their friends who are athletes as well. And we all know 2020, 2021, we're all hit hard with the pandemic. And I've seen a lot of my friends' contracts dry up. A lot of shoe companies are dried up. Nike has literally cut all their top athletes except 50. So people have less money to spend. So if you're a struggling athlete, one of the ways to make money is through social media influencing. And if you check out Open Sponsorship, you get a chance to see athletes where you can actually give athletes money and they'll promote, they'll tweet, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, your product, your services. And this is one reason why that Astrid and myself, we really love working with this company because it's really ties in both our passions. I love track and field athletics, but I also love Marketing Cloud. I love Social Studio. I do all that social media influencing. So this is our chance to really help out everybody. I really recommend it. Take a look. You'd be surprised on which athletes are recognizable. And if you do have a company, any of the big 4 GSIs or any of the small startups, if you can help out athletes, please help and sign up and offer them some influencing. And that's it for our press release is on the link below if you want to read more about it. It's like I said, it's a really wonderful program, and I think it's great for this month.
Yep.
Okay, next slide.
And that is a really wonderful program. Do you know, Jimson, when this cohort graduate?
It's sometime this month, the 23rd of February.
Cool. Okay, so we'll all look out for that because that'll be a really interesting group. Because whenever one of the cohorts from the Accelerate program graduates, it's always interesting to see what's coming through the pipeline.
There's a lot of interesting products, and I really recommend, I think if we're allowed to do or attend some of the show and tells or demo jams or demo times, some are really interesting to check out if you're interested in learning more about this product or program. Okay, next slide. I think it's Carrie's.
Yeah, I've just moved on to other things. Okay, so this is just some updates about the next couple of meetings that are coming up. So our next meeting will be the 10th of March. And in that, we're going to focus on the January release. So my challenge to you is, could you review a feature, right? So I'd love to see some of the people that actually attend this session actually picking a feature and talking about it, because I know you love to hear me talk, and obviously Jimson's dulcet tones, but we'd love to also get, you know, your feedback on the some of the sessions, and particularly some of the features that have come out. And there are some really quite interesting ones, and we'll signpost some resources in some of the slides coming, but particularly the data armor reports. I think that's going to be accessible to a lot of people. There's some Einstein features coming in, and also the AMP for email. Now, I've never used AMP, so I'm really interested to see and hear from somebody that has, who is interested in this feature. And also the WhatsApp integration. Don't know if anybody on here is working for an organization that's thinking of using the WhatsApp, but it would be great to get some feedback from anybody on there. So that's an open ask to anybody on this call. If you're going to be using any of those, I mean, we're just talking about 5 minutes or just an opinion about what you do or don't like. So please do get in touch with Jimson or I in between now and then, and I'll put a call out in an email to see if anybody will participate in that. And then the dev meeting, that is next week, and the admin week meeting is the week after that. And I don't know if anybody knows of any other meetings that are coming up in February. It's okay, don't steal the thunder there, don't steal it. But any of the other particular admin, not admin, but you know, is the data tribe meeting or anything like that, Will?
Oh, yeah, so we had our last data tribe meeting last week, so we are now in planning for our next one, which will probably be, I imagine will be April.
Cool, awesome, so something to look out for. And then I think Will was getting to there with that, but London's Calling, the tickets are now on sale. If anybody is interested in attending that. The tickets can be bought directly from the main page on the website, which is londonscalling.net. We do have a marketing track this year, like we did last year. So even for marketing users and Pardot users, there will be some content there. So I encourage you to come along and join that. It'll be a full day on the 19th. There'll be a demo jam. There are lots of different sponsors that people can go and interact with. And then the content will be available afterwards. So if that is of interest to anyone, please sign up. We would love to see you there. So also last week we talked about the B2C Solution Architect certification. And I floated the idea that we might put together a study group. So I have brought that together now, and we do have backing from Abraham, who is going to provide some of the content for that. So this is actually going to be a closed group because it provides some Salesforce content which isn't publicly available. There is an application process and a blog post where I describe a lot more about what this involves. It is over 12 weeks. There is a time commitment, and we are asking everyone to participate. So it's not something to just maybe drop in and out of, but if you have the prerequisite certs and this is the next step, then it would be lovely to have you in that session and working towards that. So the deadline is actually this Sunday. So I will drop this link in the chat so that you can have a look at that blog post and think about if it's something that you're interested in, and please fill in the form if that's useful.
I'll do that now, Carrie, the link.
Yep, perfect, lovely, thank you.
There you go.
Is awesome.
Thompson.medium.com.
Yep. Okay, now I've changed context. Oops, oh, we're nearly there, Right, so then as you have probably heard, there is a release, right, that is coming out. We usually meet on a Thursday, but we moved it from tomorrow because there's actually a release features session tomorrow that runs for an hour and a half that starts at 5. So if you're interested in that and you haven't already signed up, that's this link here. And again, we can drop these links in the chat. This is where the full release notes are. I'm sure you're probably aware of where those are. And Jimson, you also highlighted this session. And I think, have you viewed this already?
Are you kidding me? No.
No. Okay, lovely. I didn't know. So this is another sort of great session. I think, did we say it's about 40 minutes long? And is available to view on demand. So there seems to be a lot of content coming in this release, and I would love to get some feedback as to, whether people like these features, or they're somewhat there, they're halfway there, they need some more thought, all of that. This is a safe space in which we can talk about that.
I'll start putting the links on the chat as you speak.
Wonderful, thank you. Because again, I mean, I didn't bit.ly them all, right? You can't click on, it's like, but it's still useful to be able to share those if people are interested.
That's why we're like driving a car on a road trip together, I drive.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. This is definitely a two-man show. So now if we move on to, why everybody's pretty much turned up today, and that's to take a look at the custom options in order to manage consent within Marketing Cloud. And thank you, Alessia, for taking on this topic. So I think you'll be talking a little bit about why it's important and what it involves. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. So thank you, Jimson and Carrie, for having me here. And just give me 1 second. That should be it. Let's see. Clicking the wrong button, sorry. Now, okay, exactly. Can you see it?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. So I would like to kickstart this session with a very, very simple question. Could your business afford to lose $57 million? Now, it's a rhetoric question. I'm hoping to have people in the room that can say yes. However, even if that was the case, if you went back to your employer and be like, or if you are an employer and be like, okay, today we're going to actually deduct 57 million from your budget, I'm sure you wouldn't be that happy. Now, the reason why I've got this big number on the screen is because I've got a couple of examples on the slide. One of them is Wind, and I don't know how many people are familiar with this brand. It's a telco company in Italy. And in 2020, they spammed Italian with ads, and the customer were basically saying they were unable to unsubscribe, and they were fined 17 million. Believe it or not, they were not the only one. Team, another telco, maybe it's a common thing between telco, 27.8 million euro. They were fined because they were sending out unsolicited communication, and some of the contacts they were emailing were on exclusion list. So basically they said, we don't want to receive your communication. But the one that went all in is actually Google, that got fined 57 million. Now, I don't believe it's just related to email, but they are all related to GDPR. So in today's session, I'm not gonna focus on GDPR, as I'm not a GDPR expert, but I cannot talk about consent management and consent without touching on this point. So I'm hoping that the majority of the people on the call are aware of this. Was released in 2018 and is basically helping regularize the way in which people do marketing and deal with data. Who am I? So as Carrie and Jimson introduced me, I'm Alessia Mastroianni. You can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter. I'm not that active, unfortunately, there, but you can find me tweeting at times. And you have this slide on the left that says I've been nominated Marketing Champion, and I just wanted to give a quick background on it. So when I started working with Salesforce Marketing Cloud and Pardot in 2018, I was fortunate to work with people that were really competent. So when I joined Blue Wolf, they trained me. My background is in marketing automation though, so I had that advantage. one of the things that helped me a lot was the community and be able to find content online. However, a lot of the time there was a gap there and it was really hard to find information. So I started sharing articles, and if you look online, and I don't know how many of you have actually came across this, for hashtag like marketing champions, they basically nominated, I think it's more than 100 marketing champions last year, and we're all sharing content and tagging it so you can find some useful information and things that you might not find in the documentation. So what you see on the screen are some of the articles I wrote last year, and I've recently started also a social studio training series, so you can go in and check that. Right, so how is the session going to be divided into is like the intro that I've just done, then you'll have an overview. We're going to be talking quickly about what are the major points of GDPR, and then we're going to look into the solution from a building perspective and a technical perspective. So I'm actually sharing some of the script pieces that you will need to build a custom preference center, and then we should have some time for Q&A. So if you want to start writing them in the chat, feel free to, or if you can hold them back until the end, then I will try to address them either in the session or after. Right, so GDPR is divided in 3 macro areas. So the one is data permission, the second part is data access, and the third one is data focus. Why is this important and who does it affect? It's important because it affects us, or people like me, and people like, I think, majority of you on the call. So it affects email marketing managers because you're sending out communication and you're dealing with data. It affects people dealing with marketing automation system like myself, and also public relation executive because they do send out communication to do PR. So everyone really needs to be aware of it and needs to be aware of the processes and what are the legal requirements that are there for your company. Again, I cannot stress it more. I'm not a GDPR expert, and each company has a legal team normally, or should have a legal team that can advise on their requirement, because you might find that in different industry there will be differences. For example, how long can the consent last and so forth, and only someone in the legal team can confirm this. You shouldn't make decision as a consultant on that without consulting with the legal team first. So a quick example of data permission. I think everyone came across some form like the one that says not compliant. They ask you for your name, your company information, but there is no checkbox on it that says, are you opting in for emails or not? Now, these cannot be used anymore. If you know any company that does this, this is not legal, and they can actually incur in big fines. So the first thing to do is like you need to have something that the customer can check and cannot be pre-selected on that asks them to give you their permission. Another thing I wanted to highlight here is the double opt-in. So countries like Germany will have a double opt-in, meaning that after this submission, they should receive an email and then they need to click on it to give a further permission out of it. The data permission is basically saying every customer in your CRM or marketing automation system for which you have an email and you have intention to email should have given you permission to email them, but also have given you permission to have their data. So data access. I'm not going to focus much on this, but I thought it was important to have it on the screen because when you're looking at the consent management perspective, I think one of the things that gets kind of overseen is there a process for the right to be forgotten? And when we're talking about the right to be forgotten, we're talking about the ability that people have to say, if you have any outdated or inaccurate information about me, needs to be removed. Now, one of the tricky things that everyone is saying, like when you run some survey, is really hard to delete data. And it might be simple if you're just using Marketing Cloud or whatever marketing automation system you're using, because you have just one place from which you need to remove it. But the reality is nowadays, a lot of the company have more than one system and it's all connected. So a very quick example, if you had Salesforce and then Marketing Cloud and you had synced the data across, you will have the CRM system having Alessia Mastroianni information in there, they will sync in the synchronized table. If you send me an email, they will go in the all subscriber list. But if you delete me from Salesforce CRM, I'll be deleted from the synchronized table. I will not be deleted from the all subscriber list unless you have some sort of automation in place. So if you are consulting or if you are reviewing a consent management process, also look into this part, because they might assume the fact that, oh yeah, I delete them from the CRM, they will be deleted from Marketing Cloud. That will not be the case. You need to have a process in place for that. And that's why I thought it was important to add it in. We might be able to have a separate session just about data deletion. But yeah, I thought it was good to kind of throw an hint inside this. Right, so what to consider when planning your solution. Does anyone want to come off mute and have a guess? I've got like 5 elements on this slide. And based on what I've been saying so far, you might have some ideas.
Anybody? Come on, I've heard this presentation already, so I know the answers, but I don't want to give it away.
What just referring
data capture.
Hi, sorry, Samarjit here. Just referring back to the previous point, data deletion. Is that something you would always consider as part of your integration to create required processes to do so? You should, because if you don't have that process in place, that could be potentially be a fine. I would say you will want a process mapping in place, and or at least inform the customer that they will not be deleted from Marketing Cloud if they delete from the other system. So you might not build a full process, but you need to make sure that you're having that conversation. So would that be part of the planning? Yes, correct. Okay. Right. Sorry, I heard Janine because I recognize her voice, and I saw Chris coming off mute. What to consider when planning your solution?
I said data capture, just the data capture mechanisms like forms and things like that.
Yeah. I was just going to say channel. So do you want to opt out from a particular channel, and also messaging type? So do I want to opt out of everything, or do you want to give people the option to opt out from specific content or publications? That's correct. So I'm going to reveal them. So there are 5 points. So the way in which Marketing Cloud works and how you're going to capture the information, that's one of them. The right to be forgotten, as I just mentioned, just make sure that he's in there when you're planning the full solution. As Chris has said, the type of channel you're going to use, and if there is any sort of preference. So do they want to show only newsletter, for example? Are they using different channel? Are they using push notification, SMS? Do they have a call center, and therefore there is a potential part on that as well? And then, as I said at the beginning, the business legal obligation for GDPR, you cannot make them up. You can make some assumption, but you will want someone in the legal team to confirm that. And then the second part is the consent sources, because you'll be surprised, but there might be more than one source of consent. So we are just assuming everyone is signing up via an email, but the reality is that might not be the case. And where are these stored? And next question, and I'm hoping again people will go off mute. How can a subscriber unsubscribe in Marketing Cloud natively? Again, as a tip, I've got 3 options on the screen.
So you can unsubscribe from within an email. You can do it from a preference center. And I guess you can also have someone do it from within CRM and sync that information back.
Correct. And I like the fact that Chris says sync that information back, because I think one thing, again, when I in the previous slide had a sentence that say understand how Marketing Cloud works and don't make assumption, is because when I started, I assumed that the sync was going both ways, meaning that if I went in the subscriber list and I unsubscribe someone, that will sync back into CRM. Guess what? That doesn't work that way. So if you want to unsubscribe someone manually, do it in CRM first. But again, depends on what process you have. There used to be a widget that you basically add in, and then you have unsubscribe. an unsubscribe link that will sync back into Marketing Cloud. Otherwise, you need to build an automation process that will sync the data and then inform the all subscriber list, because otherwise it doesn't get updated. And the all subscriber list is basically what manages the consent in Marketing Cloud. So the reason why I've got this on this slide is because when you're doing the mapping and the planning of it, depending on what fields and what object you're going to use in CRM to store the consent, you're going to have to plan the mechanism and how actually the information are going back and forth. How do I do it? I started doing a as is and then a to be part of it. And the reason why the as is very important is because it will help you identify any gap that there is in the process. I can see Chris on my screen. Can you see Chris in the top right corner as well, or can you see the full image on the right? Anyone?
We can see the full image.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so I just see you there in the top right corner. Fine. So 3 questions when you're mapping the as is. Where is the consent stored? So if you're talking to the customer and trying to find out the customer process, where are the information stored? So what you see there on that screen that is gone is the as is process. So in this scenario, and this is an actual scenario, I had to map it like 3 months ago. The customer had an app, a mobile app. The app was connected to Salesforce CRM, and the data were stored in an object called IDP. And then they used the CRM as Service Cloud solution. Now, I could go on the app and sign up and add my preferences there. But the marketing team, can I post this? The marketing team had MailChimp as their marketing automation solution. And they had 2 third-party databases because they had a different bucket of customer. The MailChimp did not speak back to the CRM system. So I don't know if you see where I'm going here. And then they had a website where the customer could update the preferences. So the website will speak to the third-party system that could speak to MailChimp. But if I send you out an email out of MailChimp, it works exactly like Marketing Cloud. If you click on subscribe, it does a system unsubscribe, and that doesn't sync back in. So again, sorry. If I want to translate these actual as is scenarios in a to be scenario, what I need to consider is the data in MailChimp are not in the third-party database, meaning I don't know which one is the most recent consent as it stands. And if you're signing up by the app, you might be getting some email, but your consent might be different. So I had 3 sources on this diagram having different consent information. So the first thing you have to do here is which one is the source of truth. And there might not be one. You might need to run some data validation, comparing the date and creating a master table where you have all your data, and that's going to be your source of truth to start the whole migration and the whole consent management. The third part is, again, so I'm going to kill this presentation. The third part was like, when you're asking them where is stored, how is it updated, right? So we said they could go in MailChimp and update the preferences. They could go in the website and they could do it in the app. Could they do it in CRM? Potentially. Would they sync back? No. So consider this. Where is this data stored? Which one is the source of truth? And how is it updated? These are the macro questions you are going to ask when you're doing the as is process. You might want to ask what they want it to be as well, but majority of the cases I've been coming across is they're asking us to advise them. So I'll be the one coming in with option. And this one, I think my presentation wants me to speed up. This one is the to be scenario. And is way more complicated, right? So if we start from MailChimp, what we had was we knew that the data in there needed to be exported in the main system database, and we needed to identify which one was the most recent between the duplicate record that we had. This could have been just a one-off load. One thing to consider there is the customer going to carry on using MailChimp while you're launching Marketing Cloud and the other system? Because if there is, then this might be a one-off load that carries on happening if they allow people to unsubscribe from MailChimp. Because until you switch it off, people are going to be allowed to unsubscribe from here unless you send them to a page that syncs with the rest. So be mindful of that part. The other part, obviously, is the website. Where is the website information going? We maintained it in the same way because this was phase 1 of this transition. And the website information will go back into this legacy system database that wouldn't have been migrated into CRM. And the reason why they wouldn't have done that was because they had extra data, like charging information, for example, dietary requirement, other things that you wouldn't need in the CRM, and you wouldn't want to overload the CRM system with extra data. So they kept this third-party system with the extra information, and the website was still connected here. Now, as part of phase 2, the website would have had to be replaced with the CRM consent. That's the end goal, right? You want one source of truth, and in our case would have been Sales Cloud, the CRM system. Then we introduce Marketing Cloud, so that's an extra source. So if you're thinking about, again, the 3 questions, where is the consent going to be stored? And which one is the source of truth? So you're going to have some information in the third-party database in this case. You're going to have your source of truth in CRM, and you're going to have some information coming. So how is it updated from Marketing Cloud and from the app and from the website? Forget about MailChimp because we're going to get rid of it after one offload. But always try to answer these 3 questions when you're trying to map it. And what you can see here, the blue lines, again, is a manual preference center update that will go from CRM into the third-party system. I know you'll probably be wondering, why is it not automated? The only reason why this wasn't automated, that part, is because we want to get rid of the website connected to the third-party database. But if this is a long-term process, like you're not going to replace the third-party system anytime soon, you will want to automate that manual preference from the CRM down into the third-party system, unless you connect the website directly to the CRM. So basically, all the places where the customer can see the data and access the data or update the data should be connected to the source of truth that is the CRM system. I hope this wasn't too confusing. I'm gonna get questions later on, and I'm happy to bring up the slide again. So if you want to type them in the chat, feel free to. Right, then what is gonna be inside Marketing Cloud? Because we are talking about a custom consent preference center, we're talking about an email, at least 2 landing pages, one where you will see the consent management system, and one that it will be your handler. So the information that are going into that first page will have to be sent to CRM. A third page, if you want to have an unsubscribe from all. And then on the right, I also have the object that are going to store the information. And in my example, it's going to be a custom consent object plus a custom preference center object. So I'm going to ask a question again. What are the consent? Where are they normally, the consent and the preference information stored in CRM? Where can you, on which object can you store them?
You could have a custom consent object, which would roll up to a related list, or maybe you could have just a opted in, opted out flag on the contact or league directly.
Correct.
And then they also added the individual object, and a lot of people assumed that those would work together, right?
Yeah.
I think when that came out with GDPR, we were like, yes, surely Marketing Cloud will be context aware of this functionality.
It is not. But yeah, that is an option. So these are all the options, as Chris has mentioned. You have a custom object, as Gary has mentioned, you have the Salesforce consent object, so it's called the individual object. Then you can have a custom field on the contact and the account object, or you could use the opt-in, opt-out flags on the account. But because we are building a preference center, in this case, we've used a custom object. The reason though why I have these and the next slide especially is because storage alert. For each record, we had 5 records under the consent object, 1 per type. And I say you can only see 4 on the slide. We had email, telephone, post, and SMS, but plus they had another type of record. I can't remember exactly. I think it was legacy GDPR or something like that, that wasn't showing on the page, but was stored under that object. So it's 5 records just for me, 1 per channel. And the other object was the preference object. And on that we had 3, I brought 3, but we probably had 4 type of preferences in there. So again, is 9 in total. It's a lot, especially if you don't have a testing environment and then you need to sync the real connector with all the data in. It's going to take a while. So if you adopt this solution and it does work with the landing page, there were no issue. My advice will be to also have some sort of process in CRM that updates these flags on the account or contact object you're using. So you will see them updated and they will be quicker, because obviously you're syncing double the amount of data otherwise. So as I mentioned, these are the components. So we said the 2 landing page, the unsubscribe, the email, and then obviously you need a data extension and an automation, and we will see, I will show you why, because otherwise you won't have the most up-to-date information in the all subscriber list. I'll actually go into the details there. Right, so if we look at landing page 1, so I said to you, you're gonna have a page that actually has the consent information on that. So we will want the consent type, email, telephone, post, or SMS, and then the preferences. What do you need to build this page? Some JavaScript knowledge. Again, any dev can probably do it. I'm not a dev. I can copy and drag things around. So if you have JavaScript related question, maybe someone else on the call can answer them, but the code is there and it's very simple. It just marks something as required or not. Knowledge of HTML, and then the rest is all built in AMP script on this page. So what you see here is, again, is the piece of JavaScript that controls have the field all been populated or not. So is it checked or not, and it's moving. So this is the name of the field, and then it's just checking has it been flagged or not, because we've used Boolean field to actually show that, and if they're not checked, it's actually going to throw out an error to prevent people from submitting this page. Now, the reason why we have this is because people cannot go on this page to create their consent. They can only update it, because the decision from the customer perspective was every record that is going to be loaded in the system is going to already have consent. If you use this page to create consent, then you will have different functionality, but you will probably still want to use this to actually ask for a specific consent. Then the most important function on this page is the retrieve Salesforce object. So what needs to happen on this page is, because everyone already has a consent, we want to retrieve their information. So you can see the first one is retrieving from the contact object. It's getting just personalization information because it's going to be used on the page. It's not necessary, but it's obviously nice to say, hi, Carrie, this is your consent, instead of, hey, dear customer. And then the second part is we are retrieving the consent information, and we need that to actually display which consent they have. So you can see that there can be, I say to you, there will be maximum 5 types of consent. So we are running a loop to retrieve them all, and we're getting for each one of them the field that say, what's the status? Are they opted in or opted out? What's the type, and what's the ID of the consent record? Because you will have one for each channel. Then for each one of them, we're setting a status that we are going to use then to display the option, are they opted in or opted out. So the first example is, if retrieve is phone, set the phone variable to phone and set the status to opt in. sorry, if he's opt-in, set it to true, otherwise set it to false. And then you also need ID. And you do that for each channel. So you can see I've got the same structure for email, SMS, and post. Because at the end of the day, each record we know in my solution has a value. So they either be all false or all true if they've not. So if they've not provided any information, they would be all opted out, but the information will be there. It will never be blank. And then what you do here, and this is the part that every time I go back to this consent, I'm like, could I have wrote this differently? Could we have done it in a simpler way? And I struggle to explain it. But you need to imagine what you see on the right, like one block. And of this block, there are actually two scenarios, right? You'll have a scenario where yes is green and no is not, is cream. And you will have the option where no is green and yes is cream. That is the simpler way in which I can explain this. So when we look at this part of code on the left, what you have is, if the status is true, then check the button yes. So email status is true. And then can you see here we have checked under the input. So what it will pass through is the yes button is checked, but the no button is not checked. And then in the same way, we'll do the same thing for the no option. So here you will have, if the email status is false, and we were retrieving that in the previous part of the script, then checked no. So every time someone changes their preferences, these two values are passed according to the if statement. What's at the end of the form? Obviously, we're passing the subscriber key and all the IDs of the form. And then in this case, I left this here, but the attribution code is like a campaign ID, because the customer wanted to track from which campaign customer were going and updating the preference center. So every time someone changed the preferences, there will be the ID of the campaign they were in. And that's your preference page. Now, this doesn't send anything to CRM. The part that sends information to CRM is what we call the consent handler. And what you have in this is, well, like thank you page. What you do is like you get your subscriber key. It's good practice to encrypt it. And I actually have a blog about encrypting the subscriber key if you want to see it, because somewhere for some reason say you couldn't do it, and then I figured out how to do it. That was quite good. So I wrote an article about it. But yeah, so you can get the subscriber key, and then based on the subscriber key, we'll send your information to CRM. So what do we have here is, can you see we're retrieving the contact preference center email, the contact preference center for phone, and we do the same for SMS and post. So this is actually what was, sorry, let me go back in here. So contact preference center email, and the value that is passed based on which one was checked. That's why we had the two versions. Now, what we're then saying is like, if what is returned is contact preference center email yes, then set it to opt-in, otherwise set it to opt-out. It will return yes if yes was selected as checked, otherwise it won't, and therefore we're setting it to opt-out. And we do this for all the different consent. And then obviously, again, we will need the IDs of each consent type. And then again, the important function of this page is a Salesforce object. Again, if you wanted to create, you will use the create single Salesforce object, I think, out of my heart. But if you type it, create single Salesforce object, AMP script, it will actually give you the function. So this one only updates, and we have one for each consent type. So if the phone status is opted in, then use this value, right? So we have the object that is consent, we have the ID, we have the status that is matching whatever has been retrieved from the previous page. And then we also have a consent date passing the current system time, because for GDPR requirement, you probably need to pass a date. And then I add the campaign attribution. Else, if it's not opted in, pass that is false. And you will do this basically for each consent type that you have. In the same way, you'll do the preferences as well. So I've not shown it because it's exactly the same thing, but instead of using the ID of the consent, you'll be using the ID of the preference record. And then the third page, and I'll be very blunt here, this is on the website, on the knowledge website. I don't know if Carrie, you're going to share the presentation after. There is a URL in the notes, otherwise I'm happy to share it later in the chat. You grab this and you place it on your page, and this basically updates the whole subscriber list. Now, again, this is basically satisfying the job ID, the email address, and the fact that the part that you can change and I advise you to change is this: what is the reason for unsubscribing? Because when someone unsubscribes from all, you can see in the subscriber master table the reason, so you can see if they click on this email and unsubscribe from all. There might be a case in which you actually need to report on it, just in case, to do some comparison. If something doesn't go right, that will actually help quite a lot. I'm almost there. Maybe some of you are sleeping because I went quite technical, a little bit more technical stuff, but good to know. How to maintain the consent in those subscribers. As I said, whatever I've just shown you here, aside from the last part, it doesn't update the whole subscriber list. So these information are just going to CRM. They're not going into your all subscribers. So the easier way is to have an automation. So when the Salesforce object, the consent custom object, syncs back into Salesforce Marketing Cloud in the old synchronized table, it's all in one. What I've done here, I've divided it into different tables. So I wrote a query that basically says, if the consent type is email, add them to this data extension. If the consent type is mail, add them to this other, phone and SMS. And the reason why this is useful is because, for example, you will want to use the consent SMS for mobile connect and consent email just for the all subscriber. So it's quite handy to have separate table because it's easier to manage. And then once you have your consent all in the data extension for email, so you only have the email record with your active or unsubscribe, what you'll do is basically write a query to update the all subscriber list. And I'll show you the code in a second. To do that, you need to extract the data extension you created and then import it back. Because at the moment in which I built this, there wasn't a way to go from data extension, update the all subscriber list. I don't know if it's been released recently, but there wasn't a way. So you need to export it and then you can import it back. Few things to keep in mind, and you will see by looking at this SQL. So this is SQL that says, give me the information from the master consent email, and I'm doing a join with the all subscriber list. The reason why I'm doing that is to find, obviously, if the record exists. If the record exists and has a different email or a different status, and I also have the consent last modified, because I don't want this to do all the updates, just select those that have been updated, then add them to the data extension that is going to be imported in. The other part that is important is you need to include something that says if the contact key, the subscriber key in the all subscriber list is blank, meaning it's not there, add them in, because otherwise you're only going to have existing record going in the all subscriber list, but not new record until you actually do a send. So this covers the scenario where they're not in there. And obviously you want their email not to be null. But yeah, sorry, the last point is like the import will fail unless the data extension has exactly the same columns and on the all subscriber list. So make sure that, and I think this is exactly as it is, email and status are exactly the same, and that the value you're passing through are like active and unsubscribe, because you won't take things like opt-in. Why is it important? Help your client be GDPR compliant, help honor the customer request. If I don't want to get email, I don't want to get email. And then improve the marketing performance, because hopefully they will reduce the unsubscribe rate, and spray and pray doesn't work anymore. So yeah, that is all. Any question?
Oh, thank you for that. I think you've touched on, you know, a lot of the things. I don't think you're alone when you thought, oh, Marketing Cloud, surely that's one cloud product. Surely the opt-in just syncs back. Surely that's all built in. right? You definitely, like I was there. I
saw your video, Carrie. I saw your,
Oh.
I think it was Dream Ole.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Yeah, no, I may have already gone to town on that. I'll never forget it.
I was like, all the things I wish I knew. And then I watched it and I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this.
Yeah, no, it was, yeah, it's still with me, as you can tell. But does anyone have any questions or any experiences that they would like to?
I would like to bring a comment. So first, thank you very much, Alessia. It was a very interesting presentation. So my comment is regarding the data validation. So you showed us the JavaScript code that runs on the client side for the data in the form, in the web form, which is great. I think it's a best practice to have this client-side JavaScript to pre-validate the data in the web form. But we should say that it's very, very important to have a proper data validation on the server side as well. We should never rely on the validation that we do on client side for two reasons. One is because JavaScript can be disabled on the client side. And second reason is because client-side code can be manipulated and not always, with good intentions. So whatever we receive on the server side must be properly checked, properly validated, and only process data that is in a format that we expect.
That is a very valid point. So on the CRM side, there were definitely validation rule and everything to make sure the information were going through properly. And then my second question is that what you do? You disable JavaScript on the pages?
Well, some people do.
I know. I'm just joking. But yeah, if you do have more advice on like how you would do the validation on the CRM side, please feel free to expand, because like I'm very focused on the marketing cloud side. So. And
also one small comment regarding the encryption of data. We can always use the Cloud Pages URL function to carry the data in the encrypted query string. So that's a very handy function actually, and it works even when we want to carry data from a cloud page to another. So it's a very, very, very good one. So,
thank you for touching on that. The encryption. You're welcome. The encryption guy actually wrote was because I had to build a consent page, so that was built in Marketing Cloud that they wanted to share in Commerce Cloud, but they didn't want to have the integration. So what we had to do was basically saying, you're passing me the data from Commerce Cloud to Marketing Cloud by the URL, and that's how I had to find a way to encrypt it without having any integration between the two systems. But you're right, when you're doing it within Marketing Cloud, by clicking the link in the email is already encrypted.
By the way, I read your blog about encryption. Very good one.
Some glowing endorsements there. Any other questions, thoughts, experiences?
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of experience with it. I think a lot of people who never worked on a preference center project really don't understand how complex it is. And I remember back in the exact target days, it was just one system, right? One object. And once you have the Marketing Cloud connector in there, you're dealing with like 5 different parameters, right? You're dealing with, who's the database of record? Is it external or Salesforce? How many web forms are you dealing with? New pages, new clients, thank you pages. 3, you're dealing with a lot of different functions like pre-fill, update, or actions like unsubscribe. And then you have, 2 different systems. You have Marketing Cloud and you have Salesforce itself. And last, if you're using Salesforce, you have, which object are you keeping your consent? Is it individual object? Is it the contact record? So, I just rambled off like 5 different silos, and you can do the math, right? 2 to the power of 5 is like 32. So you can have like 32 different combinations on how to deal with this marketing cloud project, and we suffered a lot with it, but we do know what's going on. You have to really look down and understand, what exactly is the use case, what are the requirements, and they're just, for every time we come across a problem, there's always 2 ways to do something, right? So, and you can just imagine 2 to the power of X is just keeps escalating and escalating. So we've definitely had some challenges with these projects, but they're all doable when you break it down to its really finite system.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things around the complexity is that, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, let's say you're updating a contact in Marketing Cloud. You have to write it back to Salesforce CRM, right? You have to, right? You can either do it you can do it through a pure AMScript way. If you're really good at AMScript, you can do that. Or 2, you can leverage, Journey Builder to do that. Use the Canvas activity and get that and update your CRM. So if you have a really good coder, developer, like Florin, we would use them, or Astrid. Astrid's good at AMScript as well. You use that to inject it back into Salesforce CRM. But if you're like me, I would just use Journey Builder, and because a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So it's easier. But like I said, every use case is different, and you have to look at what's the fastest way, the best way to look at the requirements, and
what's to be the database.
Yeah,
of record.
the database of record is the big one, right? That's the key. And I'll always try to convince them to use Marketing Cloud or Salesforce CRM as your number one. But if the client insists on having MailChimp, or if they insist on having some middleware, that's fine. That's your requirement. But it just, like I said, just take a piece of paper, take a whiteboard, break down your modules, and just piece by piece, what do you need to do? What actions can you do? What is available to do in Marketing Cloud or CRM? And then go from there.
So any other questions?
Yes, sorry, how did you resolve the subscription key management in Marketing Cloud? If you have a old world where the subscription key is an email address, and the Salesforce connected world where the subscription key is a contact ID, Salesforce contact ID, how did you resolve the unsubscribe process around that?
I didn't have to resolve it, luckily, on this, because I never normally have the email address as the contact key in here. But in the moment in which you do the update, I guess, from so in your table you will have both. So you'll have to sync back the contact ID and have as a, so then you can do the comparison with both keys if you're gonna carry on using the email address. Yeah. Does it make sense? So you will have a column that is your subscriber key, that is email address, but then you will also have another column that you're going to create in which you're going to store your contact ID. I normally try to advise customer to do a migration and change it. I appreciate that sometimes they'll be like, no, there is no way we're going to change it. That's how it's been for ages. So that's what we're going to keep. But nothing is stopping you from using AMScript and doing the comparison with both. And also when you're doing the import back, your column for subscriber key will have the email address instead of using the ID.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're using
Customer
360,
go ahead, Jimson.
You can use the global party ID as well for C360, if you're using that one for database of record as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Do you have a particular scenario where you're using email address inside Marketing Cloud as subscriber key?
Yeah, so basically what happened, we had an old legacy system where the subscription key could have been anything, I'm afraid, but mainly email address. And then we went through this migration process to Salesforce CRM. So now we are in a kind of living in this kind of interim world where we still have some contacts living in the legacy system, but we also have new customers now coming from Salesforce CRM, depending on, what is the join page, what kind of product we have available in Salesforce CRM. And what's happening is now we have data coming from the old legacy to Marketing Cloud, as well as Salesforce data coming from sometimes for the same contact. And we ended up with this kind of double word for the master subscription list, in terms of we have contacts where the subscription key is an email address. Also, the same contact now has a Salesforce contact ID, because the Marketing Cloud connector default configuration recognizes the contact ID as subscription key. So with the answer process, I think what we try to do is to resolve it with an SQL, as you mentioned, in terms of master unsubscribing that contact in Marketing Cloud. I think I haven't seen the code yet. Sorry, I can't really comment how it has been implemented, but the idea was basically to check whether the contact has any kind of subscription keys by the email address. So whether it's a Salesforce contact ID or whether it's an email address, we would try to unsubscribe that contact in the master unsub list, basically depending on what is the sub key. But I haven't seen the code, unfortunately, so I don't know how it was implemented. I think we are still in the process of the full integration in terms of the permission and the master unsubscribe and the unsubscribe. So we have a My Account page, which would drive a contact to update the consent center in Salesforce CRM. And then we also have the unsub link in the emails that we drive that unsubscribe process through Email Studio. So we have different ways, as you described earlier in your presentation. But in my head, I think my question right now is, did we actually resolve this duplication in subscription keys, basically, in terms of same contact, but different subscription keys? And we have to respect whatever the subscription key is, we have to respect that unsubscribe.
Yeah, you open up two kinds of worms here, actually. So number one, if you're dealing with leads and contacts in Marketing Cloud, you got to be careful, because if a lead exists first and they get converted to a contact after, they're both going to exist in your Marketing Cloud. So that's exercise one, to dedupe that. And you can write an automation to join them if you have to. The other one I've seen before is that if Pardot was in the same org as your Marketing Cloud and Salesforce, which I have seen before, Pardot, V1 was using the email address as your subscriber key. And then that, when it comes into Salesforce CRM, it really messes things up. So I think the only thing I can suggest is to do some deduplication with using SQL and figure out all the dedupes in your system in your all subscribers, and do that. Otherwise, you need some kind of deduplication tool. You can use something like Clear MDM if you have to, or any other higher end product to do that, if you really want to be careful. Yeah. Anybody else?
No, that's all. Thank you very much.
Just to add to what Jimson say, I would say if you're trying to then move all into the contact key, even when you're emailing people, I will try to stop emailing records at email address if you haven't already, because then there is obviously the option of them unsubscribing from both, and the ideal scenario is like you're just moving into that path that just has the contact key.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
No problem.
And then we just have a question in the chat, and I think, Jimson, this references the comment that you've just made about how you handle leads and contacts and resolve those records. And is there, a blog post or a help page or some content that exists out there that is
I think, believe it or not, that was actually discussed in the time when we actually had in-person meetups. It was the one at the Salesforce Tower, and Elliot Harper presented that day remotely from Australia.
Yeah.
And I think he may have a script to actually dedupe that in Automation Studio. So I can dig that up for you and find out what the answer is. But yeah, that's been covered before in the previous talk.
Yeah, and if it's Elliot, he might have put some content out publicly as well. So that's
yeah. I've seen it. I'll get it out to you. I know it was asking a question.
Cool. Lovely.
But yeah, this is in one of the other things that is not mentioned anywhere, right? The lead don't convert to contact into Marketing Cloud.
I spent hours trying to validate that, because you're like, well, surely it just does that. And you're like, no, I can't find anywhere that specifically says it doesn't. right?
Yeah.
That does it. And yeah.
Or when you buy Salesforce Marketing Cloud out of the box, there's like 30 hidden business rules that are hidden from you. So they don't tell you what those rules are until it doesn't work. You got to call support and get them activated. But that's just a day in the life of Marketing Cloud. What can I say?
Yeah, no, put that
That's
on.
why we're all here, right? I mean,
yeah. And there are jobs. Sometimes when we look at some of this and the complexity that you've gone through there, and I'm like, don't think there's any danger of there not being any Marketing Cloud jobs anytime soon. Right? This is definitely a thing.
I never thought doing Exact Target like 12 years ago, I'd be sitting here doing this stuff. Anyway.
Cool. So we have gone slightly over time. So thank you to everybody that stayed, and thank you to Alessia for that great presentation. Just want any more questions or any other thoughts that anybody has before we wrap?
Volunteers for next meetup to talk about release notes for January?
Oh, I can feel the palpable like, look at the enthusiasm as people crawl over each other to be able to take the spotlight whilst talking about something.
All right.
Wonderful, Astrid. Good work. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Astrid might do the AMP one, the AMP one.
Well, he's volunteering.
Yes, I nominate Astrid Van Doors to do the AMP email.
I will pick the one that I want.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, bear it in mind as you're looking through those features and those release notes. I mean, the thinking is that it should be relatively straightforward if someone's actually using it, like some of these features.
Yeah, it would help if you had access to an org. Yeah, that would be helpful for demo. Yeah.
Cool. But otherwise, we will see you next month.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you, everyone.